Pigs gone wild. Researchers found that Texas has the worst feral hog problem in the entire country.
There's an attitude about pigs that they're disgusting, they're just dirty creatures, and they kind of just want them dead.
This Texas hog eradication footage was never supposed to go public, and the moment you see what it captured, you will understand exactly why. It wasn't a failed trap. It wasn't a hog migration nobody predicted. It was something moving through the brush at 2 in the morning that had no business being there, doing something that made a room full of trained wildlife biologists replay the same 30 seconds over and over in complete silence. Nobody in that room expected it. Nobody in any eradication program across the state of Texas had planned for it. And once you know what it is, you will never think about this problem or its solution the same way again. The invasion. It started in the 1500s, and it started on purpose. Spanish explorers moving along the Gulf Coast released domestic pigs into the wilderness as a living food reserve. The logic was clean. Leave pigs, come back later, eat pigs. What actually happened is that those animals vanished into the forest, spread silently across the continent, and began multiplying with no natural check on their numbers. No predator large enough to stop them. No disease evolved to slow them. By the time anyone took notice, they were already embedded across the South.
They're not indigenous to this country, so they came here in the mid-1500s. Columbus brought some to, just the Caribbean islands.
Then the second wave came in the early 1900s. Wealthy Europeans began importing Eurasian wild boar into the United States for sport hunting. These were not farm animals. They were lean, aggressive, and hardened by centuries of survival in some of the roughest terrain on the European continent. Longer legs, denser muscle, tusks designed by evolution to fight and kill. When those boar escaped their enclosures, and they always escaped, they found the feral domestic pigs already roaming free. They bred. Here is what that produced. Something worse than either ancestor. A hybrid, stronger, smarter, more adaptable, and more destructive than anything this continent had ever put on 4 legs. Not the slow barnyard hog you picture. Something that combines the reproductive rate of a domestic pig with the aggression, territory instinct, and survival intelligence of a wild boar. A species assembled by accident and unleashed without opposition. Now, pay attention to this next part, because the math is what makes this terrifying. A single sow drops 2 litters per year, up to 12 piglets each time. Undisturbed, a feral hog population can double in fewer than 5 months. Not years, not a full season, 5 months. The USDA now estimates 6.9 million feral hogs across the United States. Texas alone holds around 2.6 million of them, spread across 253 of its 254 counties. The one county with no documented population, El Paso. That is not a wildlife problem. That is an occupation, and the animal itself is built like it knows you cannot stop it. Feral hogs sprint at 30 miles per hour. They clear 40-inch fences without breaking stride. It is one pest that has persisted in the Permian Basin. Feral hogs. They are known for digging up and destroying property. Their tusks grow past 6 inches. Their skin runs over an inch thick, backed by a layer of cartilaginous plate that turns light ammunition into a nuisance. Rounds that drop a deer bounce off a large boar without touching the vitals. Researchers at Texas A&M University and the National Wildlife Research Center estimate Texas absorbs more than $500 million in feral hog damage every single year. Nationally, the annual toll reaches an estimated $3 billion. Crops annihilated overnight. Wetlands destabilized. Native plant communities stripped to bare dirt by rooting that moves faster than any recovery program. They hit military installations. They rush airport runways at dawn and force pilots to abort takeoffs. They tear through residential neighborhoods and rip up underground infrastructure. In 2019, a woman in Harris County was killed by feral hogs right outside her own home. In Williamson County, a farmer walked out at sunrise and found 24 acres of corn gone, $40,000 before breakfast. Every one of those events happened in a state spending enormous sums trying to solve this problem. Every one of those events happened while something else was quietly operating in the dark. something nobody in those programs had thought to look for. That is what the Blanco County footage was about to make impossible to ignore. The failure for decades. The official playbook looked like this: trap them, shoot them, push them off your land and on to the next county's problem. It did not work, not even close. Norman had over 740 acres in central Texas. He had worked that land long enough to know its rhythms, when the soil was ready, when the crops were vulnerable, when to check the field lines at first light. He watched feral hogs tear through a grain field he had spent 4 months cultivating. 3 acres gone in one night, not nibbled at, gone. Fence posts knocked sideways, irrigation lines shredded, soil churned into uselessness by rooting that went a foot deep in some places. He set cage traps baited with fermented corn and waited. He called in dog teams trained specifically for hog hunting. He hired professional removal crews who had done this work for years across dozens of properties. The hogs moved on to neighboring land, waited a few days, and came back. Smarter, more cautious, harder to reach. They had learned from what happened. They always do. Pay attention to how the trap problem actually works, because this is the part that never makes the news reports. Feral hogs are not simply difficult to catch. They are actively suspicious of anything new in their environment. Experienced trappers describe watching a sounder approach a freshly set cage, circle it for 20 minutes, and walk away without touching the bait. These animals have social memory. They share threat information within the group. Trap a few of them and let the rest escape, and that herd will never approach a similar structure again. Well, the hunt is on for feral hogs at Pettigrew River Wildlife Management Area. Not next week, not ever. You get one shot, and most programs were wasting it. Helicopter hunting looked like the answer. A flight team can sweep 400,000 acres in days, removing more hogs in a single afternoon than a ground crew manages in a month. The numbers looked good on paper, but for every herd cleared from a ranch in Kimball County, 2 more herds pressed in from the brush to the east. The land refilled within a season. The math never shifted. Bruce Leland, a wildlife researcher with over 20 years in the field, put it in writing. We do not have tools powerful enough to win this fight. Every traditional method is temporary. We catch a few hundred, and the ones that escape produce dozens more piglets before the next season. It is a biological reset button every single breeding cycle. Here is what nobody wanted to say out loud. The methods weren't just failing, they were making it worse. Aggressive trapping and aerial pressure doesn't reduce hog numbers, it scatters them. Hogs that survive a removal operation disperse across wider territory, push into counties that were previously stable, and plant new populations. Every helicopter flight that cleared one property seeded 3 others. A single coordinated helicopter operation over a large Texas ranch runs $20,000 before a single animal goes down. The USDA spent over $100 million on feral hog control nationwide across the last decade. The population kept growing anyway. There is a saying among wildlife managers in the South: 2 kinds of counties in Texas, those with a hog problem and those about to have one. Nobody laughs at it anymore. $3 billion a year in damage, every solution temporary, every victory borrowed time. And somewhere in that same stretch of Texas brush, at 2 in the morning, something was happening on that trail camera that nobody in any of those conference rooms had thought to look for. Subscribe right now if you want to know what it was. Because what that footage revealed didn't come from a government program, a helicopter crew, or $100 million in federal spending. It was already operating quietly in the dark. The revelation. Go back to that Blanco County trail camera. The infrared image glows green and white. Brush, silence. 2 a.m. This was supposed to be a routine review. 1 technician, 1 card, 1 entry in a database tracking hog movement patterns across the most hog-damaged state in America. Nothing about it should have stopped anyone cold, but something was already unfolding before this footage was even pulled. Starting around 2014, field researchers working the Texas Hill Country began finding something they could not account for. Feral hog nests, The shallow brushline beds where sows shelter their newborn piglets were turning up, emptied and excavated, not sprung by traps, not raided by hunters, physically dug out, cleaned, no equipment nearby, no human footprints, nothing left but disturbed soil. Texas Hog Trappers says they have already caught over 120 hogs residents say have been troubling them for years, and it was happening across multiple counties, repeatedly, in zones where no active removal operation had been deployed. That pattern is what put Dr. Michael Bodenchuk on his knees in the Cold Hill country dirt one morning. Bodenchuk is a wildlife services biologist who had spent years working this region. He had crouched over hundreds of hog sign sites. He knew what destroyed nests looked like. The pattern of disturbance, the drag marks, the scatter radius from a sow in defensive panic. He pressed his fingers into the soil around the empty bed and studied the impressions surrounding it. He stayed longer than the field protocol required. He ran through every large predator with a regional presence, eliminating each one methodically. Bears? Wrong paw geometry? No established hill country population capable of sustaining this frequency. Mountain lions? Wrong depth at the perimeter, wrong spacing between prints. He went through the list. He came out the other side with something that made no sense. He called his regional director before he logged the sample, because those tracks were small, compact, evenly spaced. Coyote tracks. Here's the part that stopped the room. A 30-pound coyote has no business threatening a 200-pound feral sow. The size math makes direct confrontation suicidal. A sow defending piglets will charge without hesitation and can crush or gore a coyote in seconds. Every field manual said coyotes were scavengers, opportunists, animals that cleaned up after the real predators. That was the accepted model, and it had held for decades. The trail cameras were telling a completely different story. The Blanco County infrared footage shows coyotes moving through brush at 2 in the morning. Not scattered, not scavenging. Moving in formation. The lead coyote drops low, ears barely clearing the grass, and approaches the nest from downwind, so the mother hog cannot sense the approach. 2 more coyotes hold flanking positions on either side, waiting. The sow leaves the nest to forage. That is the window. She is gone for minutes, maybe less. They move. Dr. Sarah Vance, a USDA wildlife biologist who has tracked feral hog migration patterns for over a decade, watched this sequence 3 times alone in her office before she accepted what she was seeing. One coyote held the perimeter, body oriented toward the sow's exit direction, monitoring. A second tested the scent of the piglets, reading the nest. Then, in a single synchronized burst, the flanking animals rushed in. One precise bite to the back of the neck. The piglet went limp. It was inside the tree line before the mother completed her turn. 5 seconds, start to finish. This was not a lucky grab. This was a coordinated operation. Laboratory confirmation came from Fort Hood. Researchers captured 18 coyotes operating in known hog territory and submitted them for necropsy. Dr. Justin French led the team. He described the atmosphere before the first results came back. Everyone already knew what the data was going to show. Nobody wanted to be first to say it out loud. Then the results landed. Nearly a third of those 18 coyotes carried undigested feral hog piglet tissue in their stomachs. Fresh, not scavenged, killed within the previous 12 hours. In Georgia, Wildlife Services found piglet DNA in over 30% of coyote scat samples collected statewide. This wasn't an anomaly. This was a pattern running across multiple states at scale, entirely under the radar. Because every hog management program in the country had been built around one assumption: go after the adults. The coyotes had found the approach nobody else was using. They weren't hitting the current population. They were hitting what comes next. The hunting machine. The technique has a name in research literature: high-risk micropredation. The way it works does not read like animal behavior. It reads like a rehearsed operation. Coyotes never engage adult hogs directly. A sow or boar outweighs them 6 to 1 and can kill one in seconds. The coyotes know this. Instead, they engineer chaos. The lead coyote sprints past the edge of a nest, fast enough that the sow cannot catch it, close enough to scatter the piglets in multiple directions. The sow wheels around, 200 pounds of fury, trying to simultaneously track the movement, identify the primary threat, and choose a direction. She is reacting to the wrong target. While she is turning, the flanking animals hit from both sides. One bite, the piglet goes still. They are back in tree cover before the sow completes her rotation. By the time she returns to the nest, they are 300 yards into the brush. Before 2010, this behavior essentially does not exist in the documented record. Trail cameras across Texas and Georgia are now capturing it in coordinated groups of 3 to 4 animals with designated roles. One distraction, one blocker, one executioner. That is wolf-level tactical organization coming from an animal most people picture raiding garbage cans. And this is where it gets strange. Most coyotes hunt at night, but specific groups in high hog territory have shifted their primary window to early dawn, the exact hour when sows are most physically depleted after a full night of foraging. The sow's reaction time is at its lowest. Her nest defense is at its weakest. The coyotes found that window and engineered their timing around it. Trail cameras show the strikes clustering in the hour before and after sunrise, with a consistency that rules out coincidence. Think about what it means for a wild animal to discover a biological vulnerability in another species across a population of millions, and then culturally transmit the technique to the next generation. This is not instinct. Instinct does not produce designated roles, coordinated flanking, or dawn timing optimized around prey fatigue cycles. This is learned behavior passing through coyote family groups, the way knowledge passes through human communities, not through DNA, but through observation, repetition, and teaching. Before 2010, none of this appears in the documented record at meaningful scale. A decade later, it is running across Texas, Georgia, Oklahoma, and multiple other states simultaneously. The behavioral spread tracks the population pressure. The more traditional prey was removed from coyote territory, the faster this technique propagated. Dr. Bodenchuk called it the most sophisticated adaptive behavioral shift he had seen in 20 years of fieldwork. The ecological pressure behind it was almost certainly human-caused. Decades of predator control had stripped away the coyote's traditional food sources. Rabbits, rodents, small prey. Entire populations were forced to innovate or starve. Right beside them, in every direction, sat the largest undefended prey surplus on the continent. Unguarded piglets, millions per breeding cycle, invisible to every other predator in the ecosystem. The coyotes didn't overlook them. They built a system to reach them. The numbers are already moving. In Texas, documented piglet losses to coyote predation have doubled over the last decade. In parts of Oklahoma and Georgia, feral hog populations have declined by 20% in areas of sustained coyote activity. No government program, no helicopter, no trap. In East Texas specifically, more than 30% of piglets disappear each breeding season, and nearly every one of those losses maps directly to zones of high coyote density. That correlation is not incidental, it is causal. Here is the part that lands like a punch. While this was happening, while coyotes were quietly running a generational correction no human program had managed to achieve, the government was paying hunters to wipe them out. From 2017 to 2020, multiple states offered bounties of up to $75 per coyote, hunters collected by the thousands. In Kerr County, Texas, coyotes were reduced by over 60% through state-funded targeted removal. Inside 3 years, the feral hog population in that county tripled. Bodenchuk reviewed those numbers and described what it felt like. You run the numbers, and then you run them again, and you come out in the same place every time. The county had spent money removing the one thing that was working. We were eliminating the cure. The bounty programs weren't a solution. They were pouring gasoline on the fire while the one animal capable of putting it out watched from the tree line. And there is something else. Something the Blanco County footage made impossible to ignore. Something that nobody who watched it has been able to stop thinking about since. Because the coyotes on that tape weren't just operating at night in one county. This pattern was already running at scale across multiple states, without anyone's permission, without anyone's knowledge, and without a single dollar of public funding. The most dangerous invasive species in American history had an answer. The answer had been there the whole time. We had been paying to destroy it. The new war. That realization didn't arrive with a press release. It arrived in a lab, in a field report, in numbers that refused to come out differently no matter how many times you ran them. The agencies willing to follow the data had to acknowledge something uncomfortable, that the most effective predation system operating against feral hogs in the United States had not been designed, funded, or deployed by any wildlife management program. It had evolved on its own, been strengthened by pressure, and then been actively dismantled by the very agencies that needed it most. That is not a small policy error. That is a decade of work running in the wrong direction at a cost of over $100 million in federal spending alone. Texas has since moved toward a coordinated multi-method strategy that formally includes protecting coyote populations in high-density hog regions for the first time in the state's wildlife management history. Counties that once ran active coyote removal programs alongside hog control have reversed course. This is not optics. It is a structural rebuild, an acknowledgement that the ecosystem had already developed a partial solution and that decades of well-funded management had been systematically canceling it out. The trap technology has changed too, and this matters more than it sounds. Smart traps now line the perimeters of working ranches across Texas. Each unit runs infrared cameras, solar panels, and a wireless feed directly to a phone application. A rancher watching from 100 miles away can see his property in real time. He watches the hogs wander in. He waits until the camera shows every animal inside the pen, every single one, and then he presses one button and drops the gate. That discipline is everything. If you trap half a sounder and release the rest, those survivors never approach a similar structure again. They pass that lesson down. The old automatic trigger cages would fire when the first animal hit a pressure plate, catch 2 or 3 out of 30, and scatter the rest permanently. The new approach is patient. It waits for the whole picture. Some ranchers have taken patience further. They leave traps open and unset for 2 full weeks. Corn scattered inside. No trigger, no threat. The hogs walk in, eat, leave, come back. They bring others, subadults, piglets. After 14 days of zero consequence, the structure is furniture in their territory. Then the camera shows 30 or 40 animals inside on the same night. The gate drops. No survivors, no animals to carry the memory of what happened there anywhere else. Communities across rural Texas are now pooling resources to run shared trap systems across multiple properties simultaneously. Helicopter teams work coordinated sweeps across hundreds of thousands of acres in compressed time windows. Texas has also begun field testing specialized toxins delivered through feeders requiring the physical strength of a hog to open, keeping deer, raccoons, and other non-target wildlife completely unaffected. In Atascosa County, a coalition of ranchers combining smart traps with coyote-protected land management watched crop losses fall from 600 acres of destroyed corn annually to nearly zero within 2 growing seasons. The Texas model is now being studied by wildlife agencies in Australia and New Zealand, where feral pig populations are accelerating along the same curve. But here is what every researcher who has spent serious time on this problem now understands. No trap replaces what the coyotes do. No helicopter matches their efficiency per dollar. No toxin operates 7 nights a week in every weather condition without maintenance, without logistics, without a budget line, targeting the exact biological point that determines whether the hog population grows or shrinks. Traps catch adults. Helicopters push herds. Toxins kill individuals. Coyotes hit the generational cycle. They remove the next generation before it exists, in the dark, in places no camera crew will ever reach. It was never about the adults. It was always about what comes next. Dr. Vance put it plainly in her most recent field report. The coyotes are not a supplement to our strategy. They are the strategy. Everything else is support. The answer in the footage. The 30 seconds of Blanco County infrared footage did not change anything because it was shocking. It changed things because it was undeniable. The wildlife biologists in that room had spent their careers building programs, writing policies, and deploying every tool available: traps, helicopters, dog teams, bounty systems, toxins, against what they understood to be the scope of the problem. And on a trail camera card pulled from a routine review, they watched a 30-pound animal run a precision predation operation that none of those programs, none of those budgets, and none of that accumulated expertise had ever come close to replicating. In real time, on camera, 30 meters from the offices where the eradication budgets were being written. Dr. Vance had been in the field long enough to have seen nearly everything. In a 2023 briefing, she described the behavioral intelligence of the feral hog itself, the animal they had been fighting for decades, with a precision that reframes everything. The moment you miss the vital spot, that hog memorizes your location, your scent, and your method. It does not come back to that spot for a year. You do not hunt these animals, they study you. The coyotes had figured out how to stay ahead of that intelligence. Nobody else had. At a military airfield in central Texas, hogs forced pilots to abort takeoffs to prevent catastrophic collisions on the runway. In Irving, they tore through golf courses, destroyed residential lawns, and ripped up underground fiber optic infrastructure. In 2019, a woman in Harris County was killed by feral hogs outside her own home. In Williamson County, a farmer walked out at sunrise and found 24 acres of corn gone. $40,000 disappeared before breakfast. The correction mechanism was already running on every one of those nights. In the brush lines, along the field edges, in the fence row cover beside those same airfields and neighborhoods. Operating in the dark, without a budget, without a team, at the one point in the hog population cycle that actually changes the math. We kept paying to shut it down. There is footage still being reviewed from operations across Texas that has not been released. Behavioral patterns researchers have documented but not yet published. Counties where the shift in coyote behavior has been running long enough that the hog population data is beginning to show something nobody has publicly announced yet. That is the next story. If you are not subscribed, you will not see it when it drops. And once the numbers behind what is happening in those counties become public, you are going to want to have been watching from the beginning. Hit subscribe, because the footage that just leaked is only the beginning of what has been caught on camera out there in the dark.